Hey, this is Connor with ADT946A. I'm going to show you real quick how to use the 946A, 959, 959A, or the 960 pump. They're all relatively about the same. They differ in maximum pressure range and some other minor components that I'll get into in this video. For this video demonstration, I'm using a 960 pump. I've got a 681 rated up to 60,000 PSI connected to it. The main components of this pump are going to be the pressure adapters here, the high pressure piston, the pre-pressure piston here. This is the vent valve or liquid return valve, and this is the isolation valve. I've also got a liquid reservoir here full of sebacate oil. You can see it's a little dirty, but for the purposes of this test, it'll be okay. Typically speaking, you want to use nice, clean, fresh oil when you're running your tests. One of the biggest differences between the 946A and the 959 or 960 is going to be the maximum pressure range. You have the adapters on your pump. The 946A is going to be compatible with 1/4-inch NPT fittings because it's a lower pressure range. The higher pressure range pumps need to use these metal-to-metal connections in order to provide a safe test setup. So for the 959 and 960, you will need to use some wrenches to make sure that your gauge or device under test is secured on here. You'll need to tighten it down pretty good. Okay, now we're ready to start our test. I've got my gauge connected here. If I had a device under test, it'd be installed here, but for this test, I'll just have this plug. What we're going to do to start is we're going to open up the vent valve and the isolation valve by turning them counterclockwise. And then we're going to purge the system. That means if there's any air bubbles inside, we're going to get those out so we can get a nice stable test. So all you have to do is just have the high pressure piston pushed all the way in, and then you're going to give this just a couple pumps. You may notice some air bubbles coming up in the liquid reservoir, and that is good. That's what you want to see. But you do want to see those bubbles go away. So if you keep seeing bubbles coming up after several pumps, that means you've got a leak somewhere, so you might need to address that. If you don't see any more bubbles, then you're good to start your test. Okay, now we're ready to start our test. So first thing I'm going to do is these are already open, so I'm going to go ahead and back this high pressure piston all the way out, which will give us lots of room to make high pressure adjustments on the test. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to close the vent valve. This is going to stop the oil from flowing right back into the liquid return when we pump this. So now when we start pumping, we'll see some pressure building up. I'm going to use the pre-pressure piston to start building pressure. You'll notice the pressure on the gauge starts building very quickly, which is good. Once it gets stiff, I'm going to stop pumping because this metal bar will bend if you push really hard. So I'm going to bring it up to anywhere between 5,000 and 8,000 PSI and stop there. Now we're ready to close the isolation valve and build pressure using the high pressure piston. The isolation valve basically is going to cut off this whole portion of the pump, and it helps make a lot more stable test because you're just going to be using the high pressure piston and the two adapters. So let's go ahead and start building pressure. This is your first time using a manual pump, you'll notice very quickly that the pressure is dropping as soon as you've reached your set point. This is called the adiabatic effect, and it is a natural phenomenon that can't be avoided unless you're using an automated pressure controller. Basically, the molecules, when you compress them so quickly, they become heated up, and then once you've reached your set point, they have a chance to start cooling down, and that's shown as a loss of pressure. All you need to do is just wait a few minutes, and that pressure will stabilize, and you'll have a nice solid test. Okay, now that the pump has sat for about 5 to 10 minutes, you can see it's got a very stable pressure reading there. Our set point is 60,000 PSI, so I'm just going to go ahead and back down the high pressure piston until we can tune in to 60,000. Perfect. You can see it's nice and stable. After your testing is completed and you're ready to release the pressure from the pump, it's very important that you do not just open the vent or the isolation valve. You've got 60,000 pounds of pressure, and you want to protect this valve from damage. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the high pressure piston and back it all the way down, back to about 8,000 where we started. Okay, once we're there, we can go ahead and open the isolation valve now. And now we can go ahead and open the release valve. And that brings it back down to our atmospheric pressure. Now your test is complete. If you have any questions, feel free to email service@additel.com or your sales rep, and we'll be happy to help you. Thank you so much.